Welcome to the Real Talk Real Estate Podcast PDX. Our mission is to give real value to home buyers and sellers, shed light on the home buying and selling process, and give insight about the market and suburbs of Portland, Oregon. I'm your host, Dylan Thomas, licensed principal broker with HomeSmart Realty Group. Although this podcast is centered around home buyers and sellers, Real Talk Real Estate is for anyone looking for home tips and market updates in the Portland metro area. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Real Talk Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Thomas, licensed principal broker with HomeSmart Realty Group. Today, I have a very special guest. She was my mentor when I first got started in real estate. We had worked together for about 4 years at our last company, and just recently, we have both relocated to HomeSmart and feeling really good about the move, loving the environment. I have Brook Hogan with me.
Hi.
Hi.
I like that you call me very special guest.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
So she is also a licensed principal broker. She headed up our last company for many, many years. I mean, basically everybody, any issues, any problems, everybody had to go to Brook.
That was a joy.
Glad to be out of that, right?
Yeah, I'm glad to be where I am now.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun. So Brooke and I had talked about doing a podcast, and her phone's going off.
Okay, there we go. Ignore.
Yeah, so we talked about doing a podcast. I kind of threw out some different ideas. Maybe we talk about the market and where it's headed. I wanted, she's the listing queen, so we had talked about how sellers should prepare their house to get ready to sell, which I think is a great episode and maybe something that we should do later.
Yeah,
but
later.
One idea in kicking off this podcast is I think there's a ton of misconceptions about our industry and about our profession. We're constantly in the, I think it's top 5 most hated professions out there.
Can you get over it?
No.
I know, it's terrible.
I understand why, though.
I mean, I do too, and yet it's so wrong.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I mean, we as professionals, there are a lot of stories about just shady ass kind of brokers out there and
right.
realtors. Those of us who do a good job have to work so hard to kind of counter that bad perception. But in my experience, 14 years or whatever, however long I've been doing it, there are so many more good realtors and good brokers out there than there are bad. So many more.
Well, yeah. I 100% agree. Out of all the transactions I've done, I think I've ran into a handful, that were either liars or shady, lazy.
Yeah. And even a lazy broker isn't necessarily a bad human.
No,
they're just not as motivated and fired up as those who are just out there just killing it.
Well, I think you could potentially run into some problems with a lazy broker.
Yeah.
As far as, if they're not getting paperwork done on time, those sorts of things, if things are falling through the cracks, I could see that being problematic for someone who's trying to purchase their house or sell their house.
Yeah. Oh, no question. From the public point of view, having a lazy broker would suck. It would. From a broker point of view, I love working with a lazy broker because I just take charge.
Complete control. Yeah,
I'm like, fine. You want me to write that addendum? Happily. I will do that. You want me to do everything?
Yeah.
I will. Absolutely. But yeah, that's not the best way to represent your client, right? Is to be just dragging your feet on stuff.
So diving into this with the misconception stuff. So what I did is I just started typing into Google, realtors are... The first 5 things that pop up: realtors are overpaid.
Okay.
Realtors are a joke. Realtors are shady. Realtors are liars, and they are obsolete.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Those are
pretty
harsh.
rough.
That is terrible.
So I guess the one I'm most intrigued about is realtors are obsolete.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of talk in the industry right now about these iBuyer kind of things, and or even people selling their house on their own, right?
Right.
And it does happen. But man, if you got a good realtor on your side, they are worth their weight in gold.
Oh, yeah.
So I can tell you, I mean, there are so many transactions we close that are smooth, easy, happy, like, okay, somebody needs to sell this and they need to buy that, and everything just goes smoothly.
Sure.
Right? And those are beautiful when you get to the end of that. And it's nice when you hear that from a client because they don't even know the things that you had to do behind the scenes to keep it smooth, right?
And that's part of why I'm doing this too, is to really just, kind of open the doors, pull back the curtains to show the full picture of everything that goes on in just a single transaction, everything that takes place in 30 days.
Right. And in 30 days time, even with those beautiful, smooth transactions, when everybody's happy, there's no real giant speed bumps and nothing goes sideways, right?
Right.
There is still a tremendous amount of work for us behind the scenes. Tremendous. Just keeping everything organized, the timelines, just understanding the contract alone and making sure our clients are represented. We know the ins and outs and every syllable of that contract is huge. Because, talk about a pickle. Mm-hmm. They could be in a giant stinking pickle if they don't understand that contract. And why would they? They're not going to, you know how, as much as I do, so many clients get the contract and they just read the line that pertains to them. Like if it's been filled out, they'll read it. But in terms of 11 pages, they're just like, yeah, keep going.
I think so many don't even read it. And so that's why it's important for us to know the contract inside and out.
Right. And the timelines and the risks, because every single transaction has these risks.
Right.
And so it's our job to not only make sure they understand it and we convey every risk associated with every decision that they make. And that's part of it. We're not making these decisions. We are the ones executing the decisions they make, right?
Correct.
And keeping them informed of the timelines that are in the contract and ways to protect them, say a buyer, protecting their earnest money and getting all these due diligence steps out of the way. Without us, I can't imagine them doing it. There's just so much risk. Mm-hmm. Can people muddle through? Yes. Is there a big possibility that things will go completely wrong? Hell yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Or especially post. I feel like, okay, so the alternative to using a real estate agent in Oregon you'd have to use an attorney to write up your contracts and addendums and whatever, because everything has to go through a title company in Oregon, escrow. Mm-hmm. And so they require that contracts are either done by real estate agents or by attorneys.
Right.
So if you're paying an attorney to write up these contracts, that's fine and dandy. However, they're not going to sit there with you and go through line by line.
Right.
That's your job, because otherwise you're paying them, $200 an hour to go line by line with you.
Right.
Where we do that with all of our clients, we sit there and we talk about the contracts. Beyond that, can someone sell their house on their own?
Sure. And we see it all the time, right? These for sale by owners, FSBOs, which is kind of a dirty word in our industry.
Now, if a house is for sale by owner, can a buyer, are they obligated to not use a real estate agent?
No, they don't have to. No one has to use a realtor, right? But so let's go back to someone selling their house by themselves.
Yeah. I guess what I was asking is, when the house is for sale by owner and a buyer sees that,
right?
I think they automatically assume that they can't have their agent.
Oh, I see. No, of course they can. Yeah. So if they're already working with a buyer broker, right? And there's a house for sale by owner down the road, that buyer broker can still represent them in that transaction. And in fact, they should.
Yeah.
Even more so, because that seller doesn't have someone representing them on their side to explain things like disclosures. That is a huge issue, is that the seller has to disclose everything they know about the condition of the property to the next buyer.
Right.
And the buyer deserves to hear that. Of course they do. And they want to hear that. And in fact, there's a contingency timeline in our contract where we have 5 business days from the day the buyer does, from the day they receive those disclosures, to revocate. If they want to terminate this transaction within those 5 business days with their earnest money protected, that's when they do it.
Yeah.
But they need to know that. But beyond that, the seller needs to understand the liability if they don't disclose every stinking thing that's gone on in their house. And the questions alone in the disclosures, it's 7 pages, I think, at this point, those are not enough, right? You need to elaborate on those too, right? Because in theory, I mean, it's the same questions that you get no matter what the listing is throughout the state.
Right.
Some of them won't apply.
They're pretty basic as far as they're yes, no, unknown, or not applicable questions. However, there are certain questions in there that, when they have those asterisks and they mark yes to that question, they have to explain exactly what had happened.
Exactly.
Or if it was fixed, how it was fixed.
Exactly.
And that usually if one of those questions are marked, that opens up another kind of can of worms, if you want to say, because we want to see proof that it was fixed if they're claiming it was fixed.
Right, exactly. And so they do need to elaborate on all those questions. They also need to be prompted, I think, by a listing agent to say, hey, there may not be questions that pertain to some of the things that are going on in this house, but you still need to disclose that. Mm-hmm. Right? At a minimum, something like a fixture could come in and be just a big piss and match at the end of a deal right, if a seller's like, I intended to keep my tool bench, right, in the garage, and the buyer's like, no, that seems like it should stay. I mean, so even the most minor kind of problems can be resolved if you have realtors knowing what they're doing.
Right.
But they can get to huge problems if no one knows what they're doing.
And I mean, so as realtors, we also put out fires after sale closes. So I think to say that we're like a concierge service, I guess you could say. And we're there from the beginning, the house searching, through the transaction, and after close as well for any additional questions, any issues that come up. We're still happy to either guide in the right direction or help remediate on the spot. Yeah. So to say we're obsolete, I think is pretty crazy. I can see how that conception comes into play with, with big companies trying to buy up houses. Now you have your 3D walkthrough tours. So.
Right. But so like going back to what I was saying, even in a perfect transaction, when it is seemingly smooth and everything goes great and there's no hiccup, right? Even that is a whole lot of work for a realtor. Okay. But then we've been through how many transactions when things not only are not smooth, but we've got sellers who are selling for reasons that are absolutely heartbreaking, right? Whether it's a divorce or a death or a bankruptcy or a short sale or what have you, there are plenty of reasons why we need to navigate this entire transaction for somebody who is in complete and utter pain and misery. And that one-on-one kind of approach to know that, look, I got your back and I'm going to get you through this. And I'm going to take the weight of it. And I am going to guide you and navigate this entire transaction for you while you're allowed to just kind of grieve, right? Yeah. And knowing that I have you. And the hardest transactions for me, and I think for really any realtor, are the ones when our client doesn't know yet that they can trust us. Right? When you know that you've got an advocate and a professional and somebody who has got your back and they're going to do everything for you and with your best interest at heart, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. What, good or bad, whether you're having a beautiful transaction and it's your first home and you're so happy, or you're selling and making a ton of money so that you could move up, or if you had a tragedy in your home, right? Yeah. I mean, I've sold a home for a woman who had a suicide in her own home with her own family. And she's like, I need out of this or I will burn this house to the ground. Those are super stressful for us because there's just so much emotion involved. But man, do we need to step up in such a big way for these people. And that's what we do. Yeah. A ton of emotional support as well. Oh, yeah. As far as I almost feel like a counselor at times. Oh, my gosh, big time. Yeah.
especially in the divorcing
Ugh.
situations.
Oh, yeah.
Which is sad and unfortunate. And I mean, sometimes they're getting along great in certain, but then other couples may not even be talking, and so you're constantly kind of bouncing back and forth and making sure everybody stays up to date and what the next steps are.
Yeah, not only up to date, but feeling like they're equal in the decision making. I mean, I've
heard
had
that so many times where people will say, you know, my ex hired this agent and that agent never even talked to me, and that's pretty bad.
That's bad. It's terrible, and you want to feel represented no matter who you are in the relationship, right? And I mean, I've had divorcing couples who got along great and were very civil to each other, and they sat at the table and they discussed everything. I've had others who wouldn't speak the other one's name. They're like, "Well, Mr. Henderson, if you talk to Mr. Henderson." I pulled up to a cul-de-sac once, and I'd never even met them yet. I could hear them screaming from the house. I was down the cul-de-sac. I was like, this is going to suck. And the first thing he opened the door. In? I did. I knocked and he answered the door and he said, his first words to me are, "This sucks." And I was like, oh, here we go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was intense, but we got through it. And they both, by the time we were done, they both felt represented and it was fair.
Yeah.
It was not easy, but it's part of what we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I guess that kind of rolls into the next question of, or I guess not question, statement on Google's is realtors are overpaid. I think common thought out there is the commission that we charge to the seller is what we are taking home at the end of the day. Can you give me that breakdown? Where does the commission go?
Yeah.
So if you're charging 6%,
right.
Are you making 6%?
No, of course not. So
right.
A seller, so in the state of Oregon, the seller pays for both their listing agent to represent them, and they pay the buyer broker who's representing the buyer. And that's split. So that 6% is split. Okay. Right. So the buyer broker
do not pay their agent.
Exactly. Buyers
in most scenarios.
In most scenarios, a buyer is their broker is working on their behalf. And they are not they're not represented by the seller, but they are being paid by the seller. Yes. So the seller pays both sides. So the standard is 6%. Of the 6%, okay, so as a listing, and when you take a listing, first of all, marketing is very expensive. So we all, as professionals, have systems in place, and all of us have a little bit different kind of system for our marketing, right?
Yeah.
So we pay to have our clients' listings go out to the masses, and whether that's we have all these online sources and websites and all the ways that we get it out there to the masses. It's not free.
Right.
Right. So we sign up.
Your print marketing, your photos, your videos, your everything.
Well, from the beginning, I mean, just to get it on the market, first of all, you got to get a professional photographer over there and pay them. Many times a drone photographer over there and pay that. Sometimes, either we have our own kind of staging materials that we've purchased ourselves and we'll kind of fluff up a house. Most sellers pay stagers on their own, but brokers help out too. And then exactly. We pay the guy to put the sign in the yard. We pay for the flyers or the perma flyer, which is the hard kind of flyer that sits there. There's so many expenses up front that we're dishing out, and then to keep it marketed throughout the life of the listing, right? That's a lot to put out.
Yeah, I think when I list a house, most of my dollars go into marketing and putting it out there.
Yeah.
It is a good chunk of change to get it going, but then the longer it's on the market, the more.
That's right. And you don't know what will happen throughout that transaction or how long it might be. You can do your research, but there's no absolute.
Right.
But then, and then even to hold a stinking open house, right? We show up with the drinks and the cookies and all of that kind of stuff. And then we have to pay to market it online. So all of those things are expenses that we dole out. And here's the thing. we don't get that back unless we sell.
Right.
Right. So we're always putting it out there. It's commission based only. So, we only get it back if that thing closes.
Yeah.
Right. And there are times that it doesn't.
So, I mean, even beyond that, though, we don't get all that commission.
Right. No, we don't get the 6%.
Commission splits in office as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So not only is almost, basically half the commission going to the buyer's agent.
Right.
Your marketing expenses on a listing.
Yep.
Your brokerage also charges fees.
Yep.
And that varies brokerage to brokerage, but that's just more money coming out.
Yeah, and so
not to mention your RMLS dues, your Century Lock, your PMAR, which is the Portland Metro Association of Realtors.
Yeah. It's an expensive industry to be a part of.
Yeah.
So keeping up with your credit hours, right? A lot of those classes you have to pay for. You have to pay, the Portland Metro area Realtors, and you have to pay your RMLS dues. You have to pay for your DocuSign documents. And we have to pay for our forms just to have the documents to fill out for our clients. We have to pay for those. So it's an expensive industry just to be a part of, much less stinking gas and, all of that kind of stuff just to get around. Yes. But then you pay for all the marketing. And then when you do close, then you pay your brokerage. Yeah. And splits could be hefty. So, a lot of you see a lot of companies out there where they're getting taken 30% right off the top of whatever you get, and then a transaction fee on top of that, and then maybe they've got a monthly little fee, or you pay for your desk or your little office space or whatever. So man, that stuff gets chipped away. And say you've got I've had deals where especially back when the market was really terrible and there were short sales and that kind of stuff, and it could be months and months. Dealing with the client. And by the time you get your check, if you broke it out to an hourly rate, you get a stinking big beefy burrito from Taco Bell for your hourly wage. That would be it, Yeah. So, and then there are those that are smooth and quick and you do fine. It's a good industry. We have to work hard to make what we make. And I think, but we can make a lot, and experienced, successful realtors do, but man, it comes at a price. And the other thing is, you never know when the deal's going to happen. So I've negotiated deals on the way to in the middle of a vacation, on a soccer field while I'm supposed to be watching my kids, during a camping trip. It's not, I say it all the time, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. So that is part of what we kind of get paid to do too, is that there's never, we don't unplug.
Right.
We can't unplug. Right.
You can't, if I do, I get anxiety.
Yeah.
if I go camping somewhere and I don't have service, I literally get anxiety.
Oh yeah. Oh, I get it. Me too. Me too. Because the thing is, we're also conditioned to do such a good job for our clients that we don't know how to not be available to them.
Right.
That's the anxiety driver right there. So, oh my God, what if they need me? What if they need me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just it. You could put a house on the market on a Friday, and you could have 3 offers on a Saturday, and there goes your weekend.
Yeah.
Right. Or you could have a buyer who's like, oh my gosh, I just found you guys this house. It just popped on, and I was going to pop out of town this weekend, but this is your unicorn home. We better get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's been so many times where you delay leaving, or you got to pay somebody
to cover somebody
else to cover you. So back to the overpaid thing. I don't believe we're overpaid. I don't think buyers and sellers fully understand all the costs involved.
No.
So I think that's why it's really great to talk about this.
But also, at the end of the day, when we're helping them navigate and avoid the risks, our clients, the risks involved are like, these are big ticket kind of risks, right?
Yeah.
We're talking lawsuit kind of stuff. And so those, and there's risk to us as well. So so having
we have to pay E&O insurance just in case something like that comes up.
Yes, we do. Because if there's a dispute between a seller and a buyer, we're getting dragged into that. And those things happen all the time. So we've done nothing wrong, but you can't not show up, right?
I'd say they happen all the time.
No, they don't. Well, but people do. No, they don't.
I
thank
have
God.
not been involved.
Yes, good.
So.
Well, I have sat in with many of our guys who have been involved. I've not been involved
at the
either.
previous brokerage.
Exactly. But I mean, it does happen. So, but my point is, we help our clients avoid that.
Yes.
And so that too is like any professional. That's part of our gig, right? And so
in a major way. And I think that kind of rolls into whether or not you're shady, Brooke, or whether or not you're a liar.
Right.
You know? I can't say 100% that I haven't met a shady real estate agent.
Yeah.
Or a real estate agent who lies.
Yeah.
When you have, I think we're up around 12,000 registered in the RMLS. We might be at 13,000 now. But when you have that big a group of people, of course, there's going to be a slime ball.
Yeah. But like in any industry.
Any industry.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's going to be some bad eggs. So I think we've pretty much knocked out the Google misconceptions.
Well, good.
I printed out a couple lists here, and we've already hit some of these actually. So one thing, we've already talked about. One thing that I always hear is how, as a buyer, how much do I have to pay the agent? Mm-hmm. How much do I owe you? In a lot of my initial buyers consultations, they always ask, well, how much do you charge for your service? And I'm happy to let them know that it's no charge to them.
Right.
The seller pays the commissions in Oregon. And that's 99.99% of the time.
Yeah.
Even a for sale by owner.
Right.
Like if I'm representing the buyer, most for sale by owners understand that the buyer is going to want an agent on their behalf.
Right.
Who's going to work for them and negotiate the deal, as well as repairs that may come up and stuff like that. So we've knocked out some of these. Let's see. Oh, that is something that comes up quite a bit, is a home passes or fails inspection.
That's a misconception, as you're saying?
Yeah. So
yeah.
I've had buyers ask me, what happens if it doesn't pass inspection?
Right.
So what exactly is a home inspection?
Right. So it's not that it fails, right? So a home inspection, so anytime you're buying a house, one of your contingency timelines is your inspection contingency, right? So you've got, unless it's written otherwise, the contract spells out that you've got 10 business days to get inspections done on the home. And that includes an entire home inspection and any other additional inspections you want. For example, radon tests are very popular right now. And
Right.
sewer scopes, of course, when they have run a camera from the clean out all the way to the street to make sure that sewer line is nice and clear. Mm-hmm. And other inspections depending on, the house, right? Well and septic and things like that.
Oil tank searches.
Exactly. So you've got those 10 business days to have these done. And then based on the inspection results, then you negotiate repairs with the seller, right? So if an inspection comes back and the inspector's like, okay, here are, you've got some issues, and you always will have something, even a brand new construction, you'll see a punch list, right? Mm-hmm. Always. These are the things that the inspector says, hey, I think you guys should address these issues. It doesn't mean that an inspection failed. Now, a sewer scope can fail, meaning the line isn't clear, but a home inspection, even that is not insurmountable. Even that, you can ask for that repair to be completed and get it done. The time that someone couldn't move forward if an inspection is really bad is if their lender won't let them. So there are times if a roof, say the roof is so bad it won't go for 3 to 5 years. It can't get a 3 to 5 year cert or certification. Right. That appraiser is going to go over there and say, I'm sorry, but we can't give you a loan on this because we're not going to take the risk as a lender to give you, all this this house and have all this debt if you can't fix if you got to put in all that money to fix a roof, right, in 3 years. So So there are times when a lender will red flag something and say, hey, we cannot get you the loan if this isn't done.
Yeah, and that would be more of a pass or fail situation.
Yes.
If appraiser says, no, we're not going to lend on this house, depending on the issue, that still may be negotiable, and the seller may be willing to take care of it at that point.
Right.
As far as your hired inspection goes, the house doesn't necessarily get a pass or fail.
No.
Any kind of big issues that come up, those may be concerning, and we would have to, every situation is case by case.
Right.
We would have to figure out a solution. The only time I've seen pass or fail type scenarios with big ticket issues is bank owned.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're as is.
Yeah. A bank owned.
If some sort of surprise comes up.
Yep. So, I mean, at the end of the day, part of what we do as realtors is we help the buyers help buyers and sellers negotiate those repairs, right? And say, yes, these are the repairs we're going to ask for,
Right.
especially if they have to be done in order to get your loan. So things like that are always going to be a roof, any kind of safety issue, any kind of dry rot, pest and dry rot, and then any kind of maybe an active problem, an active leak or something like that.
Yeah.
But those are just repairs any buyer would be asking for anyway. And honestly, and I tell sellers all the time, now that you know about it, now that you've had this inspection done and something's come to light, you're probably going to fix it now that you know about it anyway, right?
Yeah.
If there's an active leak or if there's dry rot, probably going to get it done as if you're staying in the home.
Yeah.
So you may as well get it done. Any buyer would ask for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then if a seller decides not to do any repairs and buyer backs out, due to that, the seller has to disclose what they know about the house at that time, and which will be whatever repairs came up that they weren't willing to do.
Right.
So that would likely result in either having to do a price reduction or fix it anyways.
Right. Because the next buyer comes along, they have to disclose it to that next buyer. And so, yeah, they're going to just be back at where they are now, right?
So, yeah. So no pass or fail on inspections.
Yeah.
Everything's negotiable and everything can be worked out typically.
Yeah. But the buyer does have that contingency to protect them. So if, say it doesn't fail, okay,
Right.
which is the misconception, but say the buyer says, you know what, I didn't know this. Now I know it because I have an inspection done and I'm uncomfortable moving forward. They have their contingency timeline to back away with their earnest money protected.
Yeah, so you don't even have to dive into negotiations. You can just back out.
Yeah, you can just back out.
If it makes you uncomfortable,
Right.
certainly.
So you can revocate with the disclosures. So if the seller comes over and says, here are those disclosure questions answered, they can say, oh, I didn't know this. I'm going to back away now. And then the second timeline, then they don't run together, is that inspection timeline, and they can back away during that too.
Yeah. So I do have a lot of buyers who not necessarily get cold feet or anything like that, but they're nervous about the process and nervous about putting that earnest money up. And so, like you said, you have the 5-day disclosure period, and then you have the 10 business day inspection period, which always ends up being 14 days or 15 if there's a holiday in there as well. And during that time period, if they really do get cold feet and they're just, whether it's the house or not,
Right.
They still have to provide they have to pay for some sort of inspection,
Right.
but they can still back out
And
without any recourse from the seller.
Exactly. So they can have an unconditional disapproval of the house, even if there's not one thing wrong in the house.
Yeah, it can be
Right.
perfect.
Right. So they can say, you know what, I am going to go ahead and back away as long as they had their inspection done.
So,
Yeah.
but beyond that, I mean, there's not an easy way to get out after that. That's what I always tell my buyers.
Yeah, and that's just part of our role is to say, okay, here, as these contingency timelines shut down, that we say, okay, that one's now shut down. This one's shut down. We have, other contingencies too. Say it's lead-based paint. We get a disclosure saying, hey, this is,
Right.
there could have been lead-based paint in this house. There could be, we got the title disclosure coming through when we get the prelim, right? We get that has to appraise. Right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't appraise for what you're paying, then you can back out that way. So all these contingencies protect a buyer, but we need to make sure they're informed as each of those contingencies shuts down.
Right. So another one that I often, especially on the listing side, is I want to start high.
Yeah.
Because if we don't ask for it, we're not going to get it.
Right.
And we can always come down.
Right.
So in your experience, how do you see that affect the overall picture and the overall value at the end?
Yeah. Pricing your house too high is just very seldom a good idea.
Now, is that just because of our market now, or is that
I mean, in
across the
general,
board?
in general, it depends. Some markets are hotter than others. Some are softer than others. Some inventory, depending on where you are and what you've got, right? If you've got a hot little, one level house on, and it's the lowest in the neighborhood, lowest priced in the neighborhood, you could probably push price pretty well, and get more per square foot than a bigger house in the same neighborhood that's 2-story or whatever, right? Because
For sure.
one levels are just more desirable right now. So, but it depends on the house. But by and large, I would say you're probably better being at a fair market value and letting buyers compete at that market. I mean, I've seen more people get more for their house and a higher price when they start at a fair market value and then let buyers compete and drive the price up,
Right.
versus start high and maybe get that one buyer, but more likely have to come down because people are like, I don't know, that's too high.
Yeah. So I think 2-3 years ago, you could throw a house on at any price and you were going to get multiple offers. Whether it was a high price or whether it was a crazy low price, you'd get 50 offers at that point, right?
Such a seller's market.
And yeah, I mean, even for sale by owners, they were doing good.
Yeah, there's no inventory. There's nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we have more of a normalized market. It's still technically a seller's market by the statistics up until you get into the higher price range where it is a little bit more of a buyer's market right now. In this type of market, I think it's extremely important to just price your house at market value.
Agreed.
Anytime I see them kind of pushing price, they're usually sitting past the average days on market, and then they end up with 2-3 price drops.
Right.
And they end up, I routinely see now houses that should have sold at a much higher price than what they're at now because and usually when they do these little price adjustments, they're little. They're $5,000 to $10,000, and that's not getting them to the price they should have been at the beginning.
Right.
So they keep doing this 4 or 5 times, and now it's priced below where it should have. And then it gets a stigma thinking something's wrong with the house. Why isn't this house sold? That's the questions you get about the house.
Yeah.
And nobody even wants to see it at that point, really.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If the average days on market in that neighborhood is 14, and this house is sitting there at 28 and then 38, whatever, that's exactly right. People start going, what's wrong with it? What happened? What's going on over there? Or they just start scratching their head as to what might be an issue, right? Even if there is no issue, it's just that somebody priced it too hard. I always say there's a difference between being on the market and being in the market, right? You could put your house on the market for any stinking price. You could be, you could be $1 million in a $300,000 neighborhood, right?
Yeah, you certainly can.
But if you want to be in the market, you better really be talking to your realtor about what that price looks like.
Yeah.
And you are a team. It's not like they're going to give you a price and you're going to go, God, I don't know if that's fair or not. You're going to be sharing the comps and looking at everything else to say, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we're going to get there together. Right.
Yeah. Or even in this market, you still can't price too low.
Yeah. Because you'll get competing offers.
Yeah. You'll get competing offers.
Yeah.
So I think it's a strong, if your house is on the market and it's been sitting a long time, it may be a good time to get a second opinion and really look at that price or look at what's going on. Because you can't price it low. There's not enough inventory right now.
Right. Yeah, you really can't. And there's a strategy too, and everybody has a different strategy in terms of how they want to do it when they put it on the market. And the market usually dictates kind of the strategies that should be used. And every market's going to have different type of strategies, right?
Right.
But
yeah, we have markets right now that are down.
Right.
Average price, days way up. But we have other markets right now that are booming.
That's right.
I mean, not double digits, but close to double digit appreciation, and days on market is still very, very, very low. So it all depends on where you're at.
Yep. And it's just like the example I gave a few minutes ago. I put a house on the market, and it's the smallest house in the neighborhood, the least expensive house in the neighborhood because it is. so small, but they've done some beautiful renovations, and it's a single level. And so we pushed price. We came to that strategy together, and we got top dollar. We got first day off on the market, and we got full price offer.
Yeah.
And so, but we were paying very much attention to what was out there and what we were competing with. Not only what was sold and pending, but what we were going to be competing with.
Right.
Right. And you don't know that until
indicator.
the week you go. Yeah.
Yep. I had a listing out in Southeast, and the minute we put ours on, because we had been eyeing other properties in the area that had been on, and we were going to come under just a little bit because they'd been on a long time, 60 days on market or so. So we were coming in about 10,000 on it. The moment we did that, they all dropped.
Oh, of course they did. Yeah.
You know, you run into those kind of issues as well. But back to the pushing price, I do think you brought up a good point. If the house has been renovated and it's completely remodeled, move-in ready, buyers will pay more for that.
Yeah.
And maybe even more so than what the house is worth. I think that's a good scenario. Again, case by case, neighborhood by neighborhood.
Yeah.
But that is a time where you could potentially push price a little bit.
Yeah. And think about a first-time home buyer, for example. They're likely going to get maybe a FHA loan. So they got their 3.5%. A lot of them don't understand that it's an additional 3% for closing costs, right? And so they're asking for closing costs, and we know how to write the closing costs into the deal so they can still come through and get the loan without an additional 3% out of their pockets. But they've got everything they've got is going to go into that down payment, or maybe the down payment and closing costs. So they don't have money to do renovations later.
Right.
But if they qualify for that loan, they're like, I will absolutely pay that for a house that's been renovated because I'm not going to be able to renovate it once I move in. I'm going to have to wait a while to kind of get back to that point.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's much easier to keep a house nice and neat than it is to renovate.
Yes. Yes. It's easier to keep up than catch up.
Yeah. So I another misconception that I was reading online, and I think we were just hitting on this a little bit, is that the longer a home is on the market, the more negotiable the deal.
Well, you just never know.
You never know.
You never know. If it's been, we don't know the circumstances of the seller. They could be, we don't know what their, what they owe, for example, or what the situation is.
Right.
And there's no way to know. There's just no way to know. But I think most buyers do think that. They're like, oh, it's been sitting there a while, so I'm going to throw something really low at them.
Really low. And
sometimes those things work. I tell my clients all the time, the ball never dies in our court. Like, we are at least going to counter. And I have brought ridiculously stupid low offers up to the point where my sellers are like, okay, now I'll take it. Just it took some time. And I definitely think if you volley too many times on counters and people start getting pissy.
Yeah.
But if you are communicating really well with the other side and the other broker to try to get to that point, we all want to win. We all want to get to the point where my seller is happy with the price they're getting and that buyer is happy with the price they're spending.
Yeah.
If you are good communicators and negotiators, you can get there. It doesn't have to be adversarial. In fact, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and so that little tangent here, that kind of bugs me sometimes when either you have the listing or you have the buyers and you get a lowball offer and you start going back and forth on these counters, and it's like there's not enough communication on the phone, and they just want to send paper back and forth, and I think that usually aggravates both sides because I think good communication between the realtors is the most important. I can't tell you how many deals I've had where it's taken, one counter or maybe even upfront negotiations before we even write the offer. So we can just get it slam dunked and not have all this paperwork going back and forth and both sides being drug on through this process.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the seller, this is their home. And they have lived their lives in this home and raised their children and had the spots buried behind, underneath a tree in the back. And they got all the kids, little heights in the doorway. So, this is their home. And they want to feel good about the buyer who's taken their place in this home, right? And so if the brokers are always in a piss and match about this, that, and the other, and then sharing all of that.
Right.
Well, that's just, it's just not good. It's just good. At the end of the day, it's got to feel good for everybody, and everybody gets out of it with the goal that they had. Right. I need to sell my house. I need to buy a house. Let's fix something and get to something that feels fair.
Yeah. And vice versa, like this common misconception is the longer a home is on the market, the more negotiable the deal. Like Brooke said, it all depends on the situation and scenario and what the seller needs. Sometimes they need a certain amount of cash out of the house to either buy the next home or just to pay off the loan. But at the same time, I've had instances where houses on the market a week and we're able to negotiate $10,000 off.
Yeah.
It just depends on the buyer's or the seller's motivation.
But also the terms make a big deal too. So
yes.
say you are coming in a little bit lower on price, but the seller has very specific terms that they need. So say they need to rent back for a month, or they're buying a house and they have one house that they want to buy, and they are not selling this house unless they can buy that house. And so they create a contingency with the buyer saying, look, you can only buy this one if I get that one, and we'll do it simultaneously. A lot of buyers would be scared off by that, and that could add to their days on market. So having that communication between brokers and knowing what little hurdles we need to kind of jump over to get to there, it could work for everybody. It could work for everybody as long as you put the time in to negotiate for that. Right?
Yeah, definitely. So let's wrap this up with one more. I think this is a big one. Once you start working with an agent, you're stuck with them.
Yeah, that is a misconception.
Buy side, sell side.
Right.
Why don't you go over the sell side? Are you so if you hire an agent to list your house, are you stuck with that agent?
No, I mean, the contract spells out different things, and every agent fills it out differently. Right. So I can tell you that I never would even want to work with a buyer or a seller if they don't want to work with me. That would be miserable.
Right.
If they're working with me under duress, that's my like version of hell. Right. I'm like, nope, I'm out the door. So that doesn't happen very often, but it would be a terrible scenario. And so if any seller doesn't want to work with their realtor, that conversation has to be had. And the contract every broker does fill it out a little bit different. But I fill it out where I'm like, this is a day-to-day contract. My contract with you is day-to-day. Now, the paperwork won't expire for 6 months. Like, I'm going to keep this on the market for 6 months. But if you change your mind as a seller, whether we just don't match up, right? And you want to kick me to the curb because I haven't done something I promised to do, which I would never.
Yeah.
Or if their terms change, maybe they decided they want to stay in the house, or life happens, right?
Exactly.
And people have to switch gears. Then I want them to know that, no, this is day to day. We're cool. Like, I'm not going to even get my marketing money back from them. That's just my take on it. That's how I do it as my business. And a lot of realtors are different. So the conversation has to happen with the realtor up front.
Right.
But no, you're not stuck. You're not stuck with them. And a lot of times the contract spells out too, like say the house didn't sell, but a week after you take it off the market, a buyer comes through the door and says, hey, I do want to write an offer. Then it's very likely that my marketing is what got them to the door, right? And I'm the procuring cost for that. So that is spelled out in the contract too. But we go over it all with the seller.
Right.
We go over it all.
Right. So yeah, everyone writes their contracts differently. Just to reiterate what Brooke is saying, there's different things in there that as you're signing the listing agreement, you should be going through with your broker to know what exactly you're tied in for, if you're going to be on the hook for any marketing dollars, if you can't relist with another agent for a certain period of time, or if a buyer comes through after the fact, what time period that is for.
Right.
So you're not necessarily stuck. There could be some hoops to jump through afterwards.
Or you may not even be, you may have moved on to a new realtor, but maybe the first realtor, because they're procuring cause, gets something They get some
Sure.
a little commission split or something, right? Which is fair too, depending on if they were the procuring cause. So, and those things are worked out.
Yeah.
People just talk it through.
If you do work them out, get them in writing.
Yeah.
So everything's
Yeah.
clear and
Yeah.
no one can come back on you. So on the buy side, are you stuck with the buyers? If you start with a buyer's agent, you feel he or she is not doing their job, or
Right.
you just keep losing in these multiple offer situations, are you stuck using that person because
No.
they already wrote an offer for you?
No, not at all. I mean, you don't have to. So a lot of buyers do use something that's a buyer broker agreement saying, hey, listen, I'm putting my time in. I want to commit to you. Will you do the same for me? But even that, there's not a whole lot they can do.
Right.
But it is more than that. It's just like saying, look, I'm committed. I'm committed. But a good broker is going to prove to you that you should continue to use them. But there are times that you just don't see eye to eye, or maybe you sleep in the day and work at night, and they're just schedules, or who knows what, or personality clash, or what have you. No, you're not stuck. And if you are feeling like your broker isn't doing a good enough job for you, by all means, find a new broker.
Yes.
Right? Because there are people.
Or who knows? Maybe you go find that new broker and then you find out, oh, my last person was doing a good job.
Exactly.
And I was just, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't understand.
Uh-huh.
I didn't understand. This market does suck, right? And and it's a hard lesson to learn. But sometimes a buyer doesn't understand the market, and so their broker says, "Look, I'm telling you, you're going to be getting competing offers. If you want this house, you're going to have to come in strong, and you're going to have to come at full price or overprice. Your terms are going to have to be super tight. I have to write a kick-ass contract just to get you in this house.
And a kick-ass letter.
And a kick-ass letter, right, with a photo of you and your dog and on a swing at the park or whatever it is. And so, and they just don't quite get it yet, right? And sometimes they have to take it on the chin a couple times to go, oh my God, they know what they're talking about.
Right.
And so they have to get beat up and beat out. And so maybe at that point they're like, yeah, I just keep getting beat out. I'm going to go to another realtor. And that other realtor says, hey, guess what you got to do? And they're like, oh my God, it's the same thing. Damn,
Yeah.
But that happens. I mean, it just depends on so many things. The market at the top of the list. But then the house.
Every house.
I mean,
Completely
it could
different.
be that one glowing, ding, beautiful, shiny house in the neighborhood. And you're like, your realtor knows, I have enough experience to know you got to come strong. You got to bring your A game, right? And at a minimum, you got to be ready to alter your contract. Maybe you're the first one through the door. Maybe you write this great offer.
Yeah.
But you got to say, hey, listen, you guys get ready, because if other offers come, which is likely, you're going to want to revise. And we'll get a chance to do that. And because I'm talking to the other broker.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It always comes back to the broker communication.
Yep.
I had one recently. We wrote the offer, a lowball offer. They started at $279,900. They dropped price to $269,900. We wrote it at $263,000 with $6,500 in closing cost credit. So we were low.
And that's well under the average sales price anyway to start with. So people are scrambling for that place.
We were low, and they ended up getting another offer in, of course. And but because we were first in and because of the communication back and forth, I had asked her to let me know, okay, if you get that other offer in for sure, let me know. Let me see what we can do to adjust our offer. And she was able to relate to the sellers my client's story.
Nice.
And the expectations for the transaction. And they ended up taking it without us revising.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And we were lower.
Good for you.
So I think that...
Yeah. Also, I mean, so it's a seller's decision. At the end of the day, it's a seller's decision. But I tell you, you work well with the other broker and communicate well, and make sure that you want them to understand that I am going to be a great broker. You and I have to team up to get this thing closed. We represent different sides, and I'm in my corner, right? But we want the same goal. And I'm going to be very nice to work with to get there, right? And professional and timely and all of that. That helps. That flavors the whole way they're going to present that offer to to the seller, saying this person communicates so well, and here's their story for their buyers, whatever. I mean, I've received offers from brokers who I just see an email offer. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, they never even called me.
No text, nothing.
I know nothing about their buyers. The sellers want to be like, you know who bought our house? This cute little couple, and they got their new baby, and there's another baby on the way, or whatever it is. They want to have that good juju.
Yeah.
Right? Give it to them.
Yep.
And that kind of community. I mean, I once was representing a seller, and we had competing offers, and the offer we accepted was lower in price than everybody else. But that buyer had kids, and they said, hey, we see your kids' heights in your doorway of your kitchen. I am leaving all yours on the left side, and my kids' heights are going to go right on the right side beside.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And the seller's like, oh my God, that's who I want. I love them already. And that's who we took.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So those things matter. How many houses do you sell in your lifetime? Right?
Right.
3, 2, 3, 4? I don't know. It depends on who you are. But
I've already sold 4.
Okay, well, okay.
I like
way
to
more
move.
for you. I have not. I have bought 1. I have bought 2 and sold 1,
Wow.
right? But I guess the point is you want to have a good story.
Yeah.
You want to be like, oh my God, that was, at the end of the day, I feel good about how that went down,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that kind of communication between realtors is paramount in terms of all the feels. Even if it's not like, champagne and glitter, which, I mean, they're not all wonderful. It should still be fair. At a minimum, it should still feel fair.
Right.
And you should always know my realtor kicked ass.
And
they
even
had
better
my back.
If your clients feel like they're winning.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they feel like they've been drugged through the fire and hung up wet, then
yeah,
you're probably one of those overpaid, lazy
Yeah.
liars.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Brooke.
Thanks
I
for
really
having
appreciate this.
me.
Was fun. Hopefully we can do some more in the future.
Yeah, we will. Cool.
All right. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Real Talk Real Estate PDX podcast. Stay up to date on Portland real estate action by subscribing or follow along on Instagram at Real Talk Real Estate PDX. Any questions or comments about this episode or any real estate matter, feel free to reach me at dylan.pdxrealtor@gmail.com. Thanks again and have a great day.